Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. To Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Jizo River in the Gunma Prefecture in central Japan. This area is at a relatively high elevation and is part of the Kanto Plain. It's covered in dense forests so thick that rivers can't be seen on satellite images. There are small farms scattered across this area and many houses. Struggling to preserve its natural state, Gunma still retains 14% of its territory in national parks. Gunma territory totals a little over 2,400 square miles and holds nearly 2 million people, which puts the human population density at almost 800 people per square mile. This area receives about 45 inches of rainfall each year and has an average temperature of 57 degrees Fahrenheit. This wet and warm climate supports forests of moss-covered cypress trees, umbrella pine, hemlock, white pine, and yew trees. Deciduous trees that flourish here include oak and camphor, as well as other hardwoods. The swamps host Japanese serow, which is a unique-looking antelope. Sika deer and macaque monkeys can be seen dashing through the forests and haunting the trees. The predators in this area include the tanuki, Asiatic black bears, and massive brown bears. The bears that call Gunma province rely heavily on skunk cabbage and bamboo shoots for the bulk of the plant material in their diets. Patches of these plants grow in concentrations that entice the bears to feed there, and which may be defended by the bears from interlopers into what they view as their food. Local human foragers also hunt for the tender bamboo shoots, creating a potential for tense standoffs and attacks by the bears. At 1:45 p.m. on Thursday, September 1st, 2016, 63-year-old fisherman Atsushi Aoki was enjoying casting his line along the Jizo River. He'd caught a few fish and was focusing on catching more as he walked along the riverbanks. Aoki was a slight man, standing only 5 feet 6 inches tall, but given the average height of a Japanese male is 5 feet 7.5 inches, he was close to normal for the population. For many years, Aoki had studied the self-defense art of karate and had achieved his black belt in the discipline, which is the highest rank. Karate originated on the Japanese island of Okinawa to the south and has spread throughout the world, teaching self-discipline and respect as part of its core values. Many of the strikes and movements karate practitioners learn are assembled in patterned movements incorporated into strike combinations. Karate students practice these movements thousands of times to try to train their bodies to respond to threats on short notice. As Aoki fished, he had his back to the thick bamboo and grasses that grew beneath the canopy of forest above him. Focusing on catching his next fish, Aoki was distracted from the river by a rustling in the bushes only a few feet behind him. Aoki turned to look at what was making the noise, and likely expected to see any number of small animals or birds that frequent the forest. What he saw instead was a huge Asiatic black bear emerging from the bamboo, growling as it closed in on him. As soon as their eyes met, the bear began bouncing toward him. As it came, Aoki noticed its rounded ears that reminded him of a teddy bear, albeit a huge and very aggressive teddy bear. Towering over Aoki, the bear stood at 6 feet 3 inches in height and weighed in at about 320 pounds. With a quick strike of its left paw, the bear opened up gashes on the right side of Aoki's head and knocked the agile sensei flat on his face. Now keep in mind, Aoki wasn't carrying a firearm and didn't carry bear spray, as the bears in the area aren't known to stalk human beings. His only weapons he could have improvised a defense with were his fishing poles and his hands. He opted to utilize his hands as his training had taught him to do. As soon as Aoki fell on his chest, the bear cuffed him with its paws, which flipped him over onto his back. Aoki kicked at the bear, which brought his foot within biting distance. The bear clamped its jaws onto his right lower leg and drove its teeth into his flesh. Incensed by the jolting pain and recognition of the bear's intentions, Aoki sprung back to his feet as soon as the bear released its first bite. The man realized that he had to kill the bear, or it would kill him. Due to his training, Aoki assumed his karate defense stance with his right hand forward and feet apart. As the dueling duo circled each other, the bear lunged forward and wrapped its paws around Aoki's shoulders. It raked its claws across his back, opening up gashes as it bit into his right shoulder. Aoki pushed back on the bear, but it was immovable and easily overpowered him each time he tried to force it in any direction. Each time he reached toward the bear, it bit holes in his arms as it blocked each of Aoki's attacks. Seeing an opening, Aoki reached up and struck it with a punch right between the eyes. The bear retreated a few feet and eyed Aoki up and down for a few seconds. It stood on its hind feet and stretched out its paws as if it were taking its own martial arts stance. Aoki wasn't going to wait to see what move the bear was going to do next. He jabbed out with 2 of his fingers toward the bear's eyes. His strikes were powerful and accurate, coming straight toward the bear, and he repeatedly jabbed the bear in its most vulnerable place. It didn't take long before the bear decided that Aoki had won the fight and fled into the forest. Realizing he had won the fight, Aoki focused on assessing his injuries and getting medical attention. He rounded up his fishing gear and even remembered to pick up his stringer of fish. After hiking back to his car, he loaded his gear and catch a fish before heading toward the nearest hospital in the town of Naganahara. Upon arriving at the hospital, Aoki calmly walked into the emergency room entrance, sporting his blood-spotted and tattered clothes. The medical staff listened to him recount his encounter with the bear as they cleaned his wounds and closed them with sutures. Within a few hours, Aoki was released to heal at his home. As for the bear, there was no action taken against it, and authorities undoubtedly figured it had learned its lessons. I guess they figured losing an eye had been lesson enough for it. The police did issue a public statement following Aoki's battle with the black bear. They urged people to quietly walk away if confronted by a bear. They also indicated that under no circumstances should anyone try to fight a bear. It's kind of a statement as to the toughness of the Japanese people that the authorities would even think they have to make such a public notice. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, the stanza from a James Brown song comes to mind. I don't know karate, but I know crazy. Do you think Mr. Miyagi's crane technique would have knocked this black bear out like it did Johnny Lawrence in the movie Karate Kid? Do you think this attack was predatory or defensive? Was the bear after Aoki's fish? Do you think there is a connection between Aoki's age of 63 and the bear's height of 6 feet 3? This eerie pattern may be a case for David Politis. I'll be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the dense hardwood forests around the Canadian town of Sudbury in the province of Ontario. Algonquin State Park has been the topic of 2 episodes on this channel and is only 90 miles to the southeast of the outskirts of the city. But note that the terrain between the two is consistently covered in hardwood deciduous forests, including maple, oak, walnut, and cherry trees. To the southwest of Sudbury is a recreational area around Panache Lakes. Here, the growth can be nearly impenetrable, with clusters of elderberry, blackberry, and serviceberry, yielding their sugary treats to bears and people alike. The climate is a humid continental climate, with short, hot, and humid summers and long, cold, and snowy winters. The province averages about 3 inches of precipitation each month of the year, creating many lakes and ponds in the fertile glacial till. Elk, white-tailed deer, caribou, and moose wander the expanse seeking shelter and protection from coyotes, gray wolves, lynx, and black bears. The city boundaries show people their location, but bears don't seem to care where the cities begin. On the afternoon of Sunday, July 3, 2016, 61-year-old Rick Nelson was out for a walk with his dog Margie. He was walking up a short rise with a cliff on one side of the trail and dense brush on the other. Toward the brush was a bench that had been placed there so passerbyers could relax and enjoy the view. Rick was in need of a break, so he sat on the bench, closely encircled by the brush. Now Rick wasn't just any guy, but had been an amateur boxer in his youth. He fought in the feisty and fast featherweight division, which is always exciting to watch. The smaller boxers fling their fists in furies that the eye can't process. He was married and enjoyed spending time with his 5 grandkids. In his youth, boxing wasn't his only pursuit. He also enjoyed black bear hunting and valued lessons his father had instilled in him about it. One very valuable lesson was that a bear's most sensitive area is their nose. As Rick caught his breath on the bench, he took in the view from the cliffside. His mind slipped to other matters, and Margie relaxed alongside of him. Suddenly a small bear cub popped out from the bushes only inches from Rick as he sat. He could have reached out and touched the little fuzzball, but before he could consider taking any action, the little bear retreated back into the bushes. A terrified bawl from the bear's mouth sent a shiver down Rick's spine, as he knew he was in a very dangerous situation. Rick's years of experience as a bear hunter made him aware that the cub's yelp was a cry for its mama's help, and that she wouldn't hesitate to deliver it. Before Rick could even stand to his feet, he heard a loud crash from the brush behind him as the sow closed in on him. The cub's cry had brought her with all of her protective instinct and power. Margie recognized the bear's threat to Rick and immediately jumped to his defense. She began barking and growling in loyal companion fashion. The sow now focused her attention on Margie, given she was making all the noise and ruckus. Rick knew that the bear would rip Margie limb from limb before his very eyes, and wouldn't consider just standing by and watching. He stepped forward into the space separating the bear and his dog, in an attempt to divert the bear's attention. Glancing toward the bear and seeing no retreat in her behavior, Rick quickly searched the ground for a rock or stick to use as an improvised weapon, but found nothing. Now realizing he had no defense other than himself, Rick stared up at the bear's face as she stood on her hind legs only a few feet from him. Any retreat he could take was blocked by the cliff behind him. Rick didn't wait for the opening bell before initiating the boxing match with the bear. He sent the hardest right cross toward the sow's nose, but only ended up painfully skinning his knuckles on her teeth. The sow wasn't stunned by Rick's right cross, and unleashed her own barrage of blows. Rick knew she would fake with her left paw and use her right paw to strike the most powerful blow. True to her nature, the sow feigned with her left and swatted her right paw to Rick's left shoulder, opening up several gashes that ran nearly 12 inches long. She opened up his flesh from the back of his shoulder clear to the front portion of his chest. A second strike from her sent Rick spinning and opened up a small gash on his cheek. Struggling to regain his balance, decades of boxing training kicked in, and Rick fired off a left uppercut. He was aiming for her nose, and her head was pointed down directly at his fist. When he connected with the sow, he thought he drove her nose back between her eyes, as the impact made a loud whack. The little cub had been watching the boxing match from the brush, a few feet away. When it saw its mom get socked in the nose, it dashed further into cover, yelping as it went. After Rick's punch sent the bear back a step, she swung her head back toward him and glared in his direction. He knew this was the moment of truth. She would either level him in an all-out attack or let him go. Foam and blood trickled from the sow's nose as she glanced back toward her cub and again in Rick's direction. Rick had apparently offered a surprising defense to the sow, and she could see her cub was in no immediate danger from him. She dropped back to all fours once again and slowly sauntered into the brush in search of her cub. After watching the sow and her cub make their way back into the forest, Rick knew his injuries were not life-threatening, but would need to be cleaned up. Instead of rushing to the hospital, he calmly walked Margie back to his car and drove home. Once there, he broke out the hydrogen peroxide, cleansed the long gashes along his shoulder, and cleaned up the one on his face. He dabbed antibiotic cream on all of his wounds and considered the matter settled. Rick didn't miss a day of work due to the boxing match with the bear either. After relaying the details of his exciting weekend, Rick's co-workers dubbed him Kung Fu Panda as an affectionate appellation. After news of his pugilistic practice, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation interviewed Rick. He gladly offered his advice to anyone considering a boxing match with a bear, directing them to make sure to punch it straight in the nose. He stated that even though you might have gray hair, you can still hit hard when you're pumped up on adrenaline. Rick continued by saying that he hoped people wouldn't be afraid of bears. He says he is glad both he and the bear walked away. He also acknowledged that Margie probably increased the bear's aggression with all her barking and growling. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think Rick got lucky with his punch, or was the bear discouraged to continue fighting because of it? Did the sow leave because she was hurt, or because her cub had fled? Did this bear attack turn out better than if bear spray or a firearm had been involved? I don't know about you, but the next gray-haired, wiry man I run into, I'm going to give him a little extra respect. I'll be glad to read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.